How are you doing?
Good,
Good.
good. I'm glad it is Thursday.
Oh, Friday Eve, yes.
Friday Eve.
For
My
sure.
my
Dave's freezing here, though, I can say that.
one of my old coworkers used to say "Happy Friday, Junior," and I loved that.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's
Um,
been a long week. That's for sure.
yeah, I feel like I'm just piecing long weeks together, and hopefully one day I can take a vacation.
Well, you
I
sort of live in a vacation, don't you, though?
I do, I really
A
do.
vacation area, let's say.
I honestly feel that like that's the reason I stayed here is my wife and I actually moved here kind of like mid-pandemic. What we thought was like a 6 month trip. Like we'll do it for 6 months and we'll move back to the Bay Area, which is where her family is. And like, I don't know, 4 months in, I was like, how are we gonna leave? Like every day feels like vacation. So that's pretty much we've been here for 4.5 years now. So
Yeah. Yeah, I'm jealous for sure.
I'll let you just kind of like take the wheel once some people join. Usually people trickle in. Um, it wasn't the largest group that responded, so we'll kind of see. We'll record it anyways and get people the recording. A couple people actually asked that we do share the recording because they weren't able to make it. So
Okay.
um, it seems like we got one person and me, so that should be enough to at least do it. And then we'll give some people some time to trickle in, and I'll just ping the group and let them know that we're on right now.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. So I have a PowerPoint. I can share the slides too. I can send them to you afterwards. I don't know if you have some place that you can put those or you want to send them out, but I can do that too.
Okay, yeah, we can share those on our community, and then I can also shoot it out in an email too.
Okay. All right. Can I share my screen then?
Yeah, I think let me give you cool.
Okay. Let's see. Just get this set up here. Um, okay. Let's go to the beginning. Ah, this. Okay. Can you see that okay?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So you want me to just start?
Let's give it a couple more minutes,
Okay.
and yeah, some people will be joining, and then we'll get going.
Oh, Teddy. I actually talked to Teddy like last week, I think it was, or the week before.
Nice.
Yeah. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Teddy. How are you?
Good. Good to see you here. I
Good.
know
Yeah.
I owe you some responses to some emails, so I'll send those.
No worries.
Cool. All right. Well, I'll let you take the wheel. I think a lot of people know what you do, but it's probably worth just doing a brief intro, just so everyone else knows. Laura was recommended by other people in the community as an expert and someone who runs a great business, getting lawyers specifically help, whether that's virtual assistants, paralegals, and it's all US based for those who want to opt to using US based people versus offshore overseas. Um, so I think she's definitely the expert in this spot, and I want to I guess get some tips or want us all to learn some tips about delegating, and then if you do want to follow up with her afterwards about her company, Elite Virtual Assistants. Obviously, I can help you get in touch with her, or she'll probably just share her information. But anyways, here's Laura. Laura, take it away. I will fade into the background.
All right. Thanks a lot, Brian. I appreciate it. Yeah. So today I thought what we would talk about is just kind of giving you guys some delegating and onboarding tips when you are looking to bring on that fractional legal assistant and paralegal. It's kind of a combination of our experience over the last 9 years, and the feedback from our, legal assistants and paralegals, and just kind of working through, some of the nuances of that virtual relationship. So for those of you who don't know me, Brian just introduced me, but I am the owner of Elite Virtual Assistants. I left corporate America back in 1997 to start a family. So that was actually a year before Google came out. So I worked as a VA for about 18 years before I opened Elite Virtual Assistants in 2015. I was actually just really fortunate. I kind of fell into working virtually for wholesalers, and that kind of bled into working with financial advisors. And it was great, but I always had people asking, like, I want to do what you do. How can I do that? Which was really kind of, really my driving force to open this, was to give this opportunity to other people. About a year into opening, we started working with like our first firm. So it was our first attorney client. I had never even thought about going that direction. And it just turned out to be like, this is going to sound silly, but one of the easier relationships, easier industries to work with and relationships to manage, just because the work is so straightforward. So we've been, like I said, working with attorneys for the last 9 of our 10 years. I do like to just always mention that I am an alumni of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program. One of the things that always comes up whenever I've talked to attorneys that are just opening, their firm, whether they're solo or with a partner, kind of a common theme is, they teach us how to be an attorney, but they don't teach us how to be a business owner. So why I like to bring this up is the Goldman Sachs program will definitely do that for you if you're interested. I know they're across the country. Actually, I think it's worldwide. So it's a great program, though. They call it a mini MBA for your business. So today, some of the things that we are going to cover is, like, what should you do to prepare to work with a virtual legal assistant or paralegal? I'm just going to call them an assistant as we go, but just to know that throughout this presentation, I am referring to the legal part of it. How can you delegate effectively? And then what to realistically expect in that first 30, 60, and 90 days of working with a virtual assistant. So one of the things that I just like to bring up, I know everybody's aware of it, but it's funny. I was actually talking to a CFO of a firm in Dayton yesterday, and it was they've never used anybody virtually in their office. They've had employees that had to go remote, but they never had like an actual virtual subcontractor come on board. And as we were talking, I could just see his wheels were spinning, and he's like, this is great because we don't really need a full-time person. I don't need the expense of an employee. It's more like their paralegals and legal assistants need help. And so that's kind of what got his wheels spinning. So it's just kind of a reminder that, if you don't need that full-time dedicated person, it is just a very cost-effective way to bring somebody on, get the help that you need without having to pay for all of the extras that come with having an employee. The availability is also very flexible. You can really typically scale up or down in the hours that you are working with somebody. So I'm going to talk real quick about 3 steps that you can take before you start working with a virtual legal assistant or paralegal, kind of to prep you for success before you actually start working with somebody. So we're going to talk through the who, the what, and the how. So the first part, the biggest part, is what to delegate. Sometimes this sounds like a tedious task, but I taught a delegating boot camp for about 1.5 years. And this was always the most fun thing to go through, even though it doesn't sound fun right now, but is really taking a look at your workload. And what we used to have people do is just jot down the things that you're doing on like a daily, weekly, monthly basis. Because it's really hard to get a good picture and a snapshot when it's all in your head. So when you can actually get it out on paper and look at it, it really helps to clarify some areas that, you might just really be unclear about. And it makes it easier to go into these 4 questions that I'm going to talk about now that you can kind of ask yourself. So if you have this list and you compile this list and you're looking at it, you can kind of pick out like what tasks are yours. So what I mean by that is, what are things that only you can do and that are your zone of genius? And you can think about the zone of genius as that intersection between what are you really good at, what do you love to do, and what moves the business forward. And whatever falls into those buckets, that's going to be your zone of genius and what you really should be focusing on the majority of the time. Then so once those are out, you can kind of take a look again and say, what can I delete? So what am I doing right now that is actually not serving me any purpose or reward? I know a lot of times for people, what would come up with this is, maybe they were in some group, whether it was like a networking group or a peer group, or they were on a board, that had a reason or a purpose years ago and doesn't serve that anymore. So it's kind of just taking a look at those things and saying, or what am I doing right now that is actually giving me nothing and I don't need to do this task or whatever it is anymore, and kind of cross that off your list. You can see that you're kind of whittling down then to 2 different spots where you're asking yourself, now what I have left on this list, what can I actually delegate? So when you think about delegating, you want to think about what things, can I create a process for? What can I teach somebody? What can I train somebody? Or if it's like, if it's paralegal work, like, do you actually have to be doing all of that work? Or is that, something that somebody else can do to free you up to get back into that zone of genius? And then also like thinking through like what tasks are there that you can share. And what I mean by that is, you don't always have to own 100% of a task or a project, but you might just be an integral part of a piece of that. So like just one example that I like to use for this is a marketing example. So let's say, you're doing your own marketing and you start out with a blog post or a LinkedIn article. And from there, you tend to create your own content for social media, your emails, and then you have to post everything. Well, you can take a look at that and say, I still want this to be in my voice. I'm going to be the one that's writing it. But what I don't need to do is edit it. I don't need to post it. I don't need to break it up into posts. I don't need to break it up into emails and then schedule all of that. I mean, obviously we have ChatGPT now that can do all of that, but even though it's still efficient, you're still taking time to do it, and then keep prompting it until it's giving you what you want and then posting it. So that's what I mean by sharing something. You can maybe just have to own a part of it, but not all of it. And then the other thing when you're looking at stuff to delegate is, does somebody actually physically have to be in the office with you? And I say that because one thing that I've noticed, like sometimes with solopreneurs, if it's really only them, they might need somebody actually physically in the office to do a handful of things, but the rest can be done virtually. So it's kind of even finding creative ways to do that. Or if you have a team already, but maybe they're at max capacity, if you're taking some stuff off of their plate that can be done virtually, then they could be the ones to handle the in-office thing. So it just gives you, kind of different ways to look at that. Then you want to think through who's going to best support you. You want to think about things like, what specific skills or qualifications do I need? Like, do I have to have somebody that practices the exact same area of law that I do? Like, I'll say probably 5% to 10% of attorneys that come to us want that. The rest just want a really good paralegal or legal assistant that understands the structure, the verbiage, things like that. Or you could have some, like maybe if you, and I know a lot of these crossover and you typically tend to handle obviously more than one area of law, but you know, if you're an immigration attorney, you can have somebody who handles family law, you know, that those are similar. They're not exactly the same, but there's a lot of similarities. So just again, thinking through things like that. Are there specific like state requirements that you need them to know? So sometimes I will have people, for some reason too, it seems to be like Pennsylvania and Florida, where they'll say like they have to know Pennsylvania law or they have to know Florida law. So again, those are just things that, you know, you need to think through. And then if those don't apply, can you just train the right person? So the right person who maybe has 15 years experience as paralegal, but in a different area of law, is that going to work for you? Like, is the personality piece of it more important than the skills and qualifications? Like when we're doing pairing, we actually take all of that into consideration, but personality is still a big piece of it because you can have somebody who's really skilled, but if you don't get along with them, that relationship is not going to work. And then the next piece, which is honestly like one of the most important pieces, is making sure that you are onboarding somebody properly. This is actually our sweet spot. We've worked years perfecting this. But the first part of this is making sure that you have like either a mission, vision, guiding principles, core values, whatever you want to call them, that you know, the reason why you opened your firm, the reason why you're practicing and doing what you're practicing, like, and what are those driving values, you know, that are important to you when you're creating that culture. And when you can explain those to somebody, you want to bring somebody on who, you know, understands them and agrees with them and is in alignment with them, but they also help you. It also helps the person coming in understand why and how you make the decisions that you make. And I'm actually going to give you, I'm going to pull something else up here. I'm going to give you an example of an issue that I had with an internal team member of mine who, one of our, like actually our top guiding principle is communication. And the problem that we were having is whether it was a team member or it was a client or a VA reaching out, even though like if there was some action behind it that had to happen, even though she was handling that, nobody knew that she was handling that. So she wasn't saying like, hey, I received this and I'm working on it, or hey, I got your email, I'll have an answer for you, you know, end of day tomorrow. We use project management software called Asana. Not replying in there that she saw your message. Like it was a real problem. And we talked about it several times. And then I went back to like our guiding principles and, you know, her and I went through it together. So, you know, for example, under communication, ours is open, honest, and timely communication is our top priority. We never let a message go unanswered. Every interaction is acknowledged promptly, even if the full resolution takes time, which kind of goes back to what I was just saying. And once we had that conversation, you know, it just clicked with her. Like she was just thinking, well, I'm doing it. But then it kind of clicked about, yes, like that is our top guiding principle. And so, you know, she knew that she had to make changes, which she did. And then the second part of this is just creating that success plan. So, you know, we call it a 90-day success plan when we are onboarding people with us. And what it is it's setting the relationship up for success from day one. So you want to create a communication plan. And what I mean by that is, if you're not clear about the best way to reach you, then you're going to fall around figuring that out instead of laying it out initially. So for example, you know, if your VA has questions and is emailing you, but you are buried in emails and you only get to check your email once or twice a day, that's not going to be the best way for them to reach you, especially if there's something, that needs immediate attention. So, maybe like an example of that would be you can send me an email with the details, but
What?
I need you to
No, this is just a guy's trip.
I need you to text me or call me, so that I know that I need to look at this email, or I know that there's like something urgent on deck. And then you want to set that meeting cadence. And I can't say this enough, and I know it's really difficult, especially for trial attorneys, but you really need to be able to spend as much time upfront as you can getting this person up to speed, because the more time you invest upfront, the less time you're going to have to invest down the road or continue investing down the road. It also helps you kind of build that trust factor faster. You're getting to know this person, you're meeting on a regular basis. They're able to come to you, ask questions. You can give the right answer so that there's, nothing's dropping. There's no lull in communication. And then it is making sure that you're setting really clear expectations. And what we have people do is set 30, 60, 90-day goals. So basically, at the end of 30 days, this is what I want to see happen. I can actually give you an example of one that just came in. We just onboarded this attorney with a paralegal, and like his top 3, we ask you to just pick 3 because again, we don't want that overwhelm of some giant list, but pick 3 wins, right? What are 3 wins by the end of 30 days that are going to work for you? And his was drafting trust documents, managing an estate planning tracker, and then drafting contracts. So those were his top 3. So, and again, what's good about that is once you're once you're working with somebody, they can tell you right off the bat, like, that's not realistic. Like, I can't do that in the first 30 days, but that's more of like a 60-day goal. So again, it's laying out what your expectations are and then hearing from the other person, is that realistic or not? Does anybody have questions? Before, I feel like I just am doing a ton of talking. So
I have one question that, oh, sorry, go ahead. You can go
Brian,
first.
go ahead. I can do that for you.
I was just going to ask about sort of this idea when onboarding a VA of really just like letting them shadow for a while.
mhm.
I always feel that when I try, and I've unfortunately gone the route of getting VAs and then it not working out a couple times. And I feel like a lot of my frustration has to do with them not having full business context of all the things that I'm doing. And so I feel like the next time I go ahead and do this, I was thinking I would just kind of like eat the cost of not getting any efficiency gains in the first 30 days, and literally just letting them shadow pretty much everything I do and learn, and then kind of throwing them in the fire afterwards, so to speak. But I don't know if that's actually an effective method. So that was just a thought of mine.
Well, let me ask you a question. Do you have core, like, are you able to share like a bigger picture with them about like what your mission is, but also what their role is, and like what those expectations are of the role? Because there's actually something else I'm going to get into that I know is a problem that I've heard from our paralegals before, a couple slides in from here, but just curious if you've done that, like trying to, I guess what it would be is trying to figure out like where something could have gone wrong, aside from you, like you said, paying somebody to shadow you.
Yeah, I do. I think the hard problem with a really early stage company like mine is that, our mission kind of stays high level and stays consistent. And a lot of our background information, I do have like stuff I share and get them up to speed, but it doesn't really explain what I do on a day-to-day basis, which is obviously what they need to help me with.
Uh-huh.
So I think like a lot of the emails that I send and the Slacks that I'm in and the things that I'm working on, I kind of just want them. It's hard to get them to shadow when they're remote, right? It's kind of like a whole different experience, and that's, I think, what I really struggle with is the remoteness of it all.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I do try to get them up to speed. I do have materials I share with them to give them kind of like the overview. But I also struggle in really explaining what I do day to day, because a lot of what I need help with is prioritizing what's important and what's not, and working on the high priority things first. And the only way that they get that is kind of like by watching me work and substitute one thing for another. And then also, I see Scott commented, "How do you overcome perfectionism?" And I struggle with that. And the reason I struggle with that is because I think um, the VA wants everything also to be really perfect, and they're afraid to do something that might be low consequence, but also they don't want to make a mistake. And I often just say, like, just do it. Just do it. We can work. I don't have the things that I do on a daily basis are not always like really high consequence, meaning we can walk them back if it's incorrect. But what I really need is like someone who's more proactive and saying, okay, this is an objective. I'm just going to do it. I'll run it by Brian, but I'm going to start working on it. And that's, I don't know, that's something that I personally struggle with. So and I recognize it's probably not what everyone else struggles with, but yeah. Anyways,
Yeah, well, I think you can also take a little comfort in knowing if you're struggling with it, somebody else is. So, um, it's I do have actually what I'm going to talk about right now is the start small but share the big picture. I'm going to kind of give you an example of what that is, but the other thing that again we'll talk about, but is if there's like specific things that you're working on that kind of going back to what you were just talking about, like not really being able to see like how you're responding to people and seeing the Slack channel. I don't know if you've ever used like Loom and where you can just do like a screen recording and you can start recording it. Like you can, as you're looking through your Slack channel one day, just throw on a Loom and start recording the screen going, okay, like this is, one of the things that I do. I look through here, I will comment on this. And you can make like this little like video library that then somebody can kind of refer back to you or back to kind of get more context around how you do things versus just being told to do something. Does that make sense?
totally. Yeah. And I love Loom. I think it's great. It's changed kind of the way that I work with people
Mhm.
who were either partnering on something, or in this case, I have sent a lot of Loom to the VA I work with. So yeah, that's a great tip, and I should probably use it more. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah,
well, and it does help with because you're actually, you're killing two birds with one stone. You're getting some work done, but then you're also creating this like training library for somebody. So again, if you were to have somebody come in, even if you did have somebody shadow you, they still can always refer back to the Loom instead of reaching out to you to say, I forgot how you responded to this kind of thing. Like they can look at the Loom library,
yeah.
and get that answer. Um, but this will kind of go along with your question. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. I don't even know if I had a really succinct question, so I think that's helpful. But Saeed, I know you had something you wanted to chime in with real quick.
No, I think what you said is also consistent with like what I struggle with, and it's not. I mean, it's not even for me like just a problem with purely VA. Like I think, like I don't know for this post specifically, but for the council community, like there are a lot of former big law like lawyers that had access to a lot of like secretaries and junior associates and so on, and a lot of the times like people that you work with are pretty competent. And if you're not happy with someone, you can always transition to someone else. But once you're on your own, like then you need to like just pick, who you work with. And then it's also exhausting just like to interview people. Sorry, just to interview with people. And then like once you find someone that looks great on, like paper, and then like the interview process has gone great, but they don't necessarily deliver. I need to be patient, but like until what time I need to be patient is something like I'm struggling with, because every day I'm not transitioning to someone else. Like it's just sometimes time wasted.
Mhm.
And but at the same time, I also recognize I didn't know what I was doing, or like to the extent I know now when I first started doing this job. So like I need to be patient, but like I think that's the first question, like how much patience is good enough? Like, and then the second part, like something I struggle, like I always know like when someone works for me, it like, sharing that vision and mission is nice. I like the way you put it. Um, but I also recognize like even when I pay someone, I don't pay someone a percentage of what I earn. Like it's a hourly fee, like fee, like, and then the upside is like even if a client pitch or like some of like what I'm trying to get doesn't work out, I'm on the hook for that. The downside is like even if I earn like 15, 20, $25,000 from a project, like that person doesn't get more. And I think sometimes it creates like I don't want to say misalignment of incentives, but like it's just I can't blame them for not being as motivated as me, like for getting something done. And sometimes it's not even like billable tasks or like just something that's gonna bring money directly. To Brian's point, sometimes it's really just going through a task throughout the day. It might be marketing, it might be just, as you mentioned at the beginning, like just going on LinkedIn and like just helping me with just more outreach and so on. And but at the same time, like I know like it's not like a legal job. So like I don't know. I'm struggling with that. So like just if you have any tips for that, I would love to hear.
Yeah, well, actually, like, when you're talking about, let's even say the compensation piece,
Yeah.
have you ever thought about, adding some kind of like a bonus structure? So obviously, like you said, if like a case falls through or something and, you're kind of you lost out on whatever, you've paid out to that point. Obviously, that wouldn't be included in that. But on the successful cases where you win and you do get that, like, could you give them a kickback? Like, hey, we win this case, we get it in on time. And obviously, a lot of that is not based on you, it's based on so many other
Yeah,
factors. But,
exactly.
there could be, though, some type of like bonus compensation that you offer them for something like that, which, and I think the other piece too that's really important to remember is obviously we all need money, right? Like we need money to survive, but that's not always the motivator for people. It's not. Some people are motivated by other things and really knowing what those other things are and being open about that. Like I know for like one of my team members, she's not motivated by money. It's not that she doesn't need money but she's married, she has a husband, like, they're comfortable. What she's motivated by is praise. It's kind of like you can do like that love language for offices. Like it's kind of that, like really trying to figure out because a lot of times, I mean, you'd be surprised at the data. I wish I had it at my fingertips now, but how many people will go to a job that doesn't pay them as much because the culture is so much better, or they have more flexibility with this, that, or the other thing. So I think it's also like really trying to tap into what actually motivates this person and how can I make that work for me?
That's correct. But in my experience, like when people are like motivated with more than, let's say, money, like just, and it's great, but then sometimes as you grow, like you are not necessarily the biggest firm or like the best whatever or the best paying environment, like just I mean even if they are not there for money, like just I don't know, like in my experience, some people that I really enjoy working with like ended up going somewhere else, and I was actually supporting that decision because I'm like, yes, it's better for your career growth, not good for my business, but for your career growth, like it's actually better. So like I don't know if you follow like my struggle, but it's just like that's what I meant, like in terms of how to balance those. But anyways, I don't want to take up more of the group's time, so
Yeah.
thank you
Okay,
for
I do. I see what you're saying, and it is a delicate balance though that you really have to just figure out what's going to work, and it kind of starts though with bringing the right person in again. That's doesn't want a big corporate job. It wants to be working, with an individual or something. So it's kind of looking at it from those different angles. Like I know the people that work for us, like for example, like our legal assistants and paralegals, what they like about it is that they don't want a full-time 9 to 5 job that they have to go to an office for. They want the flexibility of being able to work from home, and they don't want to be out looking for clients on their own. So that's why they're with us. Like we're the ones that do that work and then we do the pairing. So I mean, I'm just trying to say there's always so many different ways of finding that happy medium, if you will.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Okay, so the first tip though that I have for the delegating effectively is the start small, but share the big picture. And it's funny because I just had this conversation with one of our paralegals last week. And it was something that she was getting frustrated about because she said, like, as she was working with this attorney, they were almost going too slow, and they were giving her like really small chunks of work to do without her ever knowing what the big picture was. Like, what does the end goal of this look like? Where she said if she would have known that, she actually would have prepared things differently. So let me just like run through a really fast example about of this, because I was just taking notes when I was talking to her. So like the attorney, let's say that you are, working with a paralegal and you say, I need you to research case law on this subject. And then they do that and then they bring it back to you. And then you say, okay, now I need you to draft a summary of the findings. And then they do that and they bring it back to you and then write an introduction for the brief. So you kind of get the idea of, you're giving them these things to do just based on a topic. Where if you were to actually explain more of what the big picture was, so reverse engineer that and say, okay, like we're trying to prepare a legal brief for a motion to dismiss on X. We need like an argument that hinges on demonstrating whatever the case is, supported by precedent in X. Once they know that and like they know what the objective of that is, then they can go back and actually prepare the information much better for you without having to go back and, just be inefficient basically in not giving you what you want because the big picture wasn't explained to them. So you can still start small, but give them that big picture. So that's more on like the paralegal side, but then, the other tip is start with those repetitive tasks. So like I'm just going to give an example for like legal assistance. The main thing that we help with when it comes to that is client intake, for example. That's pretty much a repeatable process. You kind of have like a series of questions to see if this is the right client for you, and if not, you refer them out to X. So that's a repeatable process that you obviously could make a process around, or like Brian mentioned, if you wanted them to shadow you through one so that they can really grasp like from A to B exactly what happened, and then you ask them to create the process. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do that, but starting small, big picture in mind, repetitive tasks are really good ways to get started. The next tip is providing like the information and resources that an assistant needs to accomplish the tasks and to make good decisions. And I bring this up because a lot of times the onboarding is very delayed because the access was not given prior to the onboarding. And that just causes like a delay and a disconnect in the very beginning because the person actually can't like get started and jump in when they think they're going to, because it's nothing is actually prepped for them to start. So sometimes there's issues with IT or giving somebody access to your software, or getting them an email address, like whatever it is, just making sure that all of that is ready to go from the get-go. And then again, making good decisions. That is, it's not an easy thing to do, but there are, once somebody is like really working with you, they need to understand why and how you make decisions, or they will be coming to you forever and never being able to make that decision on their own. And that's where your guiding principles. So even if you don't have core values or guiding principles yet, you can kind of think through that and think like, well, if I don't want somebody always asking me, how do I base my decisions? It's like, how do I know what to do? It's because I believe in these 3 to 5 things. And that just falls into the desired outcome too. So, sharing with them, like, what is your vision for the role? Maybe this is like, hey, I'm just using you temporarily until I can bring somebody into the office. That's good for somebody to know. If your vision is, I really want this to turn into full time. I see myself having a team of like 5 people. That's good for them to know. When you're giving tasks, make sure you're giving deadlines. When I was teaching that delegating boot camp, I was shocked at how many times people were like, well, I told them that I needed this done, but it was never done. And that was always my first question. Well, what was the deadline? And, they'd say, well, I didn't have one. Soon isn't a deadline. As soon as possible is not a deadline. Especially when they have a lot on their plate and they might have 5 other things that they feel are pressing for you. And then you come in and you say, I need this done soon. Soon to you could be move this to the top of your list, and soon to them could be tomorrow after I do these other 5 pressing things. So it's being super clear on deadlines. And again, that falls right into expectations. What are the expectations? If I give you something and I don't give you a deadline, ask me for a deadline. So, and I mean, most of the time, the assistants they're gonna fish for that, but it's just something that I like to bring to the surface because it's not something everybody thinks about, or they just kind of take it for granted. Tip 3 is it's kind of, and it's hard even as a business owner to always remember what hat you should be wearing. When you think about, you have your own practice, or even if, you're a partner, you're an attorney, you're an entrepreneur, you're a leader, and you're a manager. And a lot of times it's really hard to know, especially between the leader and the manager piece. So much emphasis is on leadership and how to lead people. You can't just lead somebody without them having a manager. So if you don't have somebody to manage them, you are the manager. It's just like if you don't have a legal assistant, you are the legal assistant. If you don't have a paralegal, you are the paralegal. So it's understanding that you have to be able to manage people in order to get the most out of them, and to kind of build them into leaders themselves, right? Because that's really what you want in the end, is not having to give somebody direction at every turn. And there's a really good book. I mean, I'm sure you guys have probably read it, but it's a super fast read, 1 Minute Manager. Gives a lot of good tips for just being a good manager without micromanaging. And then when you are in that manager role and you're wearing that hat, you have to be open to honest feedback, and then you have to be able to give honest feedback. And that's not easy. Like, we actually call those courageous conversations because they're not easy to have. But, as long as you are open and transparent with people about, I like you as a person, but this isn't working. Let's figure out why, instead of just, saying, oh, I need to work with somebody else because this isn't working. Like, get down to the roots of why it's not working, because if it's something that keeps happening over and over again, it's typically the process and not the person. So those are just things that you need to think through. And then, are your goals and expectations being met? And if they're not, again, you've got to be able to discuss that with somebody. Like, hey, I had this goal in 30 days that you were going to be managing all of the client intake, and I am still doing half of it. Get to the bottom of why that's happening. Do they need more time? Is there something that's unclear to them that they haven't been able to get an answer on? Like, are they doing something that's inefficient? Like, it's just really, again, just diving in to figure that out, because if you have the right person in place, 99% of the people in this world really want to, maybe not that high, but they want to do the right things. Nobody ever wants to fail at something. And I think that's something that we all have to keep in mind, and just figure out, like, I know this is a good person. I know they have the skills and qualifications. Why isn't this working for me? Take a look at the process, because typically the person wants to do their best. Okay, I'm not going to go through all of these, but I like to show this slide because it kind of shows you a realistic overview of what the levels of delegation are. And the problem that I've seen over the last, 10 years total, is people either get stuck on level 1 where you're giving step-by-step instructions to somebody and then they have to report back for feedback and next steps, but they don't ever get out of level 1, which means you're micromanaging every step of the way. Or they want to start at a level 6, which is just like, here's a bunch of work, here's a bunch of processes, you're smart, you can figure it out. You never want to ever start that way either. You want to make sure that like one of the goals should be working through the levels of delegation. And I'm going to give you on the next slide, like how that falls in with the 30, 60, 90-day expectations. Okay, so if we're looking at, like, let's say the first 30 days, that should really be like, it should be your foundational time. So it's about building trust, level 1 to 2 delegation. So you're starting out, you're starting out easier. I'm not even going to try to go back. You're going to start out with that step-by-step and then progress to that next level. So you're going to learn about one another, what communication style works. You might think one works that you started out with, but it's not. So we need to fix it. Understand and acclimate with the firm's culture or your culture if you're a solo. Having those weekly conversations to provide and receive feedback, learning the tools and the software, completing a realistic number of assigned tasks or projects, and then striving to achieve that set goal. So that's what those first 30 days should be. So whatever you set that goal at for 30 days, that should be what this person is working towards and that you're helping them work towards. And then at the 60-day mark, should be all about your systems and processes, and you should be moving through like levels 2 to 4 in that delegation chart. So what's currently working and not. Don't create more work for yourself with delegating. And this is, I see this when it's difficult for people to delegate. And one of the things that I want to touch on, somebody brought up something about expecting perfection. You really need to set that bar for yourself on what level of perfection is acceptable to you. And it obviously, especially working with attorneys, like attention to detail, not putting things wrong in contracts and documents, like you need to say what that level is. Depending on what it is, like it's never going to be 100%, and they're not you. So they're never going to be you. So you literally have to take a step back and say, what am I willing to accept? Because there are going to be some things that you have to kind of pull back on. So is it 90%? Is it 95%? Is it 85%? Like and do you have checks and balances in place for that? So, kind of thinking of that, because if you don't have that set and you're always expecting 100% perfection at every turn, I can tell you right now, you're going to be fully disappointed, because people aren't you. And I know anybody even like who has kids or what have you, like it's always like a give and take, I remember just being happy if my kids took their plate off of the table and put it in the sink. That to me was progress. Then the next part was, okay, let's bypass the sink and put it in the dishwasher. So, just kind of thinking through, like, let's take, steps to get to where I want you to be. And if you're working with somebody, you're delegating to somebody, and it's not making your job easier and you actually feel more stressed, why is that? Like, let's talk about why is that happening? Why is everything not running efficiently? What is happening that is causing you to stay in that micromanaging space? And then again, at the 60 mark, continue to complete that next set of assigned tasks and projects, any added responsibilities, and then team integration. And then at the end of 90 days, that's the 3-month period, you should be in a really good rhythm by this point. At the end of 90 days, so really going on to your 4th month, this person should be working pretty much independently, level 5 to 6 delegation at this point. They should be completely integrated with you, your team, your firm. Tasks and projects should be completed independently. You know, the assistant owns and manages multiple responsibilities, and the lines of communication are completely open. So, you know, whoever they're working with at your, you know, at your place, they should be able to always get the answers that they need. The other thing, I just always like to give these couple, you know, tips, like just protect yourself. Obviously, we know like this is a we always want to believe that everybody's trustworthy, but you know, unfortunately, trusted source, or like Syed mentioned, like it's a long process to vet and hire and bring somebody on, and then if it doesn't work out, you got to start over again. So, you know, try to go to a trusted source, you know, so that you can kind of bypass some of that piece of it. And then, you know, try using a password manager. You know, we use LastPass. I use that for my team. I always recommend it to our clients. It's just an easier way to not be, you know, handing out your keys to the castle. So everybody has, you know, all of your login information. And then when they leave, you have to go and change everything again. Like at least with that LastPass dashboard, you know, you can share access, you can revoke access, and they actually can't get into your system because they won't know your password. So that's really it. So are there more questions or?
I have one that you touched on when you were showing the slide around kind of like the 60-day mark. You mentioned like don't create more work by like when you delegate, you shouldn't be creating more work for yourself. And
Yeah.
I guess my one like pushback maybe is that it does require like a pretty large investment up front. Like there
Yes.
is a lot of work that you are creating, and it's kind of like packed in the start of getting that person up to speed and really doing a good job giving them sort of an instruction set and or you know letting them shadowing actually creates more work. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
it's not as easy as just like letting them watch what you do. So there is that, like I guess being patient, and I think it also answers Saeed's question around patience. Like you kind of alluded to, you know, 90 days is 3 months. That's a quarter of a year. It's a long period of time to get that person to the point where they're fully integrated. And I think that's probably we all want instant results. I am no exception there. And even 90 days feels like a lifetime for me. But I think having that perspective is helpful.
I think it also depends on how much work this person has and how much time they're spending with you. You know, what the one thing that I've noticed is, I mean, you know, we have clients that might use 10 hours a month and some that use more like 80. That's like 20 hours a week. Obviously, if somebody's working for you 20 hours a week, they're going to get there faster than somebody who's working 2.5 hours a week. So I think that's just another thing to kind of keep in mind. And it also, you know, it really, you're right. You have to put the time in initially, but that is one of the things that I've heard over and over from our paralegals is that they said, sometimes I feel like the attorneys actually make more work for themselves. And I don't know if that's in addition to walking through everything with them, then they still are going back and doing their work, but doing it repeatedly. Which is why I think if you really look at like those levels of delegation, making sure that like your goal, I'm trying to get back here. I can't get back here. I can't get back to that without, here we go. It's just making sure that you're moving through these different levels, right? So like you want to start out with those step-by-step report back, feedback, next steps. You should only have to do that a couple times and the person should, you know what they're doing. And then you move on to level 2, like where they'll identify the problem, offer solutions and their recommendation, and then wait to hear if that's what you would do. You know, so you can really move through these faster or slower, but I always just like to lay it out as realistically, this is what you can, but obviously, this is what you can expect. Because you want to, it's just like anything, we all want everybody to hit the ground running. I think everybody does. But it's making sure that you lay a good foundation first for them. Is really what more of the expectation piece is. But as long as you understand the different levels and that's what you're working through. So if you feel like you've been working together for a month and you're not past level 1 yet, there's definitely a problem. So, you need to be able to say like, hey, we're in our 2nd month and you're still coming to me for everything. There's a problem there. So that's when that conversation has to be opened up. Any other questions?
With the last 5 minutes, if anyone's hanging on, I do just so everyone knows, there's no horse in the race for us right now. Like I love Laura and I love the business, but I do want to give her a second to talk a little bit about how she solves some of these problems for her clients, because there's a lot of stuff in there that I'm sure working with a system that's already kind of set up helps you get through these levels of delegation. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about your system and how you get your VAs sort of onboarded and set up for success. And if it's not working out, what happens then? Like some of that stuff, because I think if people are considering this, I'm sure they're also considering working with an agency like the one that you run.
Sure. Yeah. So the way that we work with our VAs, so they're very highly vetted. So we only take like the top 1.4% that come in. So we know that we have top quality people that will be serving our clients. But from there, what we do is we go over like these are our expectations of you. Like this is how we work with our clients. These are our guiding principles. Like we go back to our guiding principles, our mission, our vision, to like they have to be aligned with that. Because if they are, then we know that they are always giving their best. We go through the onboarding process with them. We make sure that they understand from beginning to end what they have to do and why they're doing it, right? Like they need to know why, like the importance of making sure this communication plan is done, making sure that we have a meeting cadence set up, making sure we're clear on, hey, this client says in 30 days, this is what he wants to see, is this really going to happen? They can say, oh yeah, that's not a problem, or no, it's not. So that's a conversation we're going to have on the onboarding call. So like we make sure that all of that is laid out first. And then when we get on the onboarding call with you, the relationship manager is there, who's going to be working with you and the VA the entire time so that we have a really good understanding. Obviously, we have a good understanding from the conversations that we've had with you. We have you fill out that exploration form that dives into you as a person as well as what what your needs are. But it's just all encompassing and just making sure that we're all on the same page. And we have issues where the client doesn't want to tell the VA something right off the bat, so they come to us. And then we become the third person. So what we do is we get on a quick call. Hey, this seems to be an issue. I hate to say force, but you have to keep those lines of communication open and have to be able to have those conversations together. That's why we're there, so that if for some reason that's not happening, we're there to make sure that we're making that happen. Because once we get through that initial, if you even want to call it awkwardness, but of feeling, because it does take a little bit to build that trust, right? And so if people are afraid, like, oh, I'm gonna break the trust because they're gonna think that I'm coming down on them, or that's not what it's about. And we make sure that that's understood on both sides. You mentioned if things don't work out, like what happens? Is that the other part of your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think just all those kind of like points of difficulty that people might not want to do alone. So in this instance, it's yeah, if things aren't working out, if you do hit day 90 and they haven't taken over like a large amount of responsibility, sort of like level 6 delegation, um,
Yeah.
what's what's
So
this? Yeah, how do you guys help with that?
I will say that we don't, if we can tell if something's not working out much sooner than 90 days. Um, if there's constant back and forth, like between the client, between the VA, something just isn't working out, if by that first, we do a calibration call at 30 days. So that's where we jump on one of your already scheduled meetings, see how things are going. If there's been a lot of back and forth up to that point, and then we get there and we're trying to talk through what the issues are, and it just, typically if it's not working out, it's not working out early rather than 90 days in. So if that's the case, we will go ahead. I mean, we actually leave it up to the client. We'll say, look, we had this call with you. We talked it all out. Here's a game plan. We can try this game plan. Or if you don't want to try this, then we could just transition you to somebody else. So, that's really more up to the client themselves if they want to do that. But when there's an issue, we always try to come up with the game plan and then implement the game plan. But there's times that the client's like, look, I'm just telling you, I know that this is not going to work. So that's when we will do a transition. And our transition plan is that from day one, our VAs are putting together an SOP as far as this is what I do on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis. We don't have your processes, but we've got the lay of the land of what has to happen. So it makes it a lot easier for somebody to, for us to bring somebody else in and then get them up to speed. So if it's a case where the client does not want the VA like to train this new person, then we comp hours for the training, like to the client. If it's a case where, like for example, we just had somebody who one of our VAs had to leave because they're taking care of aging parents, and she just couldn't handle the workload anymore. In that case, she was doing a great job for the client. The client loves her. We paid her to train the new VA on what her, responsibilities were, do some shadowing. We cover that piece of it so that it's a seamless transition at that point. So it really depends on the circumstance, but we try to make it as easy as possible because, nobody ever wants it to come to that.
Awesome. I know we're a little bit past time. If anyone wants to reach out to Laura after this, please feel free. I can share her contact information.
Yeah,
And
here's my email too.
there it is. And she'll send the slide deck that I can share with everybody with some follow-up stuff, materials. But Saeed, I don't know if you are now visible because you want to ask a quick question. I think if anyone does need to jump, feel free. But
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have to finish, you kind of responded to that, but I was curious if you charge for that coordination time or it's just like them actually doing the work, including our own instructions.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Do you charge for that, like planning or coordination time that you mentioned, if something isn't working or if like just like how to improve the process and so on, or like is it technically part of like whatever you are charging for, like each hour?
Yeah, so we will cover, like I said, we'll cover 4 hours of training is what we cover. If it doesn't matter which way it goes, actually. Like it doesn't matter if somebody left and the client needs to retrain, we'll comp you 4 hours of training time. If it's a case where a VA is leaving but training the new VA, we will comp 4 hours of training on that as well. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Laura. This is really great.
Brian, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I loved the just hearing about the process and the things to look out for. I've kind of lived this in my own life, and so it's cool to see some of the things I might have screwed up, but also some really good tips. But thank you. I will, if people reach out to me and want to be connected with you, obviously I'll pass along your information, and let's just be in touch about ways that you and I can partner in the future, because there probably will be many. So,
Okay, that sounds great. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks everybody that was here. And yeah, thank you, Brian.
all right. See you soon.
Okay, bye.